Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Connectivity Trends for Senior Living. My name is Adlan Fela, and I'll be your host today. It's my pleasure today to welcome a great roast of speakers and panelists who will provide different perspectives about senior living connectivity. We have Brad Williams, who's Senior Vice President Operations at Argentum, which is an industry association. We have great speakers from MSPs, managed service providers, and we do have also the operator perspective with Lawrence Brown, who's the Director of IT at Living Care Lifestyles. Just a few housekeeping items. So this event is being recorded and will be available for clients that have purchased the report. There are handouts available in the dashboard with a couple of assets available for you to download. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll be reviewing them as we make progress. And finally, please tell us how we did. At the end of the show, you'll see a survey popping up, and please let us know what we did well and what we missed during the event. Just a few words about Maravedis for those who don't know us. So we're three people with boutique wireless infrastructure firm since 2002. So it's been 22 years already in the business. Myself, I'm a chief analyst. I had the research program, the syndicated reports, online service, and pretty much anything that has to do with research. And I'm based in Miami. Tom Gruba, who's based in Chicago, is our chief consultant. He brings 30 plus years of experience in telecommunications, including his tenure as a program manager and PLM for Canopy Wireless at Motorola, which then became Cambium. And finally, Michael Stanway, who's in LA, brings a lot of experience and knowledge from the multi-dwelling unit, multifamily space. He was a CEO at Bongo Wireless, as well as managed a managed service provider, Smart Era, for a number of years, and a lot of operational, hands-on experience in the multifamily. So today's presentation is made possible because of the publication of the report, which was published in April, so last month. And the report was the opportunity to dive into the space, looking at what property owners, property managers, and the managed service providers are doing in terms of responding to the needs of the seniors in the US with connectivity requirements changing. We try to do independent, reliable, and affordable research. The report starts at only $995. So hopefully that will entice you to buy it to support independent research and get the information you need. It's a balance of quantitative and qualitative information based on one-on-one interviews with some of the folks that are present today, and provides market projections. Has 41 pages. The market projections are included in more detail in the companion Excel file, which is also available for purchase. As you can see a snapshot here, the information here provides projections by market segment, whether it's independent living, assisted living, memory care, etc. We were fortunate to work with NIC that provided some of the raw numbers for our model. And we do provide forecasting for equipment in the form of the access points and switches, as well as the services for managed service providers. Some of the questions answered by the report, and some of which we'll address today during the panel, is that what is driving the connectivity in senior living? There's always a perception out there that seniors are not using technology so much. The reality is there is a big demographic changes with baby boomers entering senior living. They're avid users of technology in terms of devices, in terms of the bandwidth applications, streaming, what have you. And so we look at those trends and explain why connectivity is really the foundation for enabling everything else that the senior living communities need to address, given that to be profitable, they have to be super efficient in a time where there's labor rising costs, shortage of caregivers, needing to do more with less. So technology can play a big role in relieving some of the pain for the senior living communities. And then there is the quantitative aspects that I mentioned before. A few words about our special MDU, which stands for Multi-Dwelling Unit Research Package. We published today a new report on tip open Wi-Fi, which is a technology that will impact the multifamily connectivity space. Next month, we'll be publishing a new report on managed connectivity for affordable housing. Last month, we had senior living, and then we also provided research on conventional rental. So a 360 overview of MDU connectivity. Again, just to recap on our services, we do research, but we also provide research becomes kind of a foundation layer for providing consulting and advisory services to clients, whether they're MSPs or technology vendors or regulators. And that's all for me. So without further ado, I would like to pass on to Brad Williams from Argentum, who will be providing sharing some research and perspectives about senior living. Thank you.
So welcome, thank you, Adeline. And I'm here today really kind of to set the table for the panelists for the group and just give you a little bit of the kind of the future forward look for senior living and the importance of connectivity within it. I'm going to move pretty quickly through my presentation, so forgive me, I do talk quick. But if there's questions, you can reach me afterward, and I'm happy to have a more in-depth conversation. I'm Senior Vice President of Business Operations for Argentum. About us, we're a nonprofit association that represents professionally managed resident-centered senior living communities. We represent about 70% plus of the for-profit communities out there. To define senior living, for us, it's independent living, assisted living, memory care, and then CCRCs fall into that group. We are not skilled nursing. We don't cover that group as far as a nonprofit association or from a policy front. The real differentiator in our mind, we feel we serve communities and the residents in those communities. Skilled nursing is more facilities and patients. So that's kind of the term we use to describe who we are and who we represent. A little bit about the industry, it's growing. Well, our nation is aging rapidly, which is going to cause our industry to grow. As you can see here, I won't get into detail, but 198% growth for 85 years and older from 2016 to 2060. You see the group 65 years and older will grow 92%, and then the 18 to 60 year olds will grow 15%. Point is, a lot of growth happening within the demographics for the aging population. Another number here, we expect Americans to need more long-term care. It was 12 million in 2010. We project about 27 million in 2050. Of those that need long-term care, there's about, well, 31% we project won't need any care, but there's 69% that will, and this gives you kind of a breakdown, this second graph, on the amount of care or the length of care they might need in the future. So senior living itself, how are we doing? When we take a look at assisted living and some of the measurements there, assisted living saves on an annual basis about 43 billion each year on Medicaid and about 15 billion in Medicare. Over 90% of our residents are reporting high satisfaction, and over 85% of their families report high value. We are increasing in growth, but we also feel we are uniquely positioned really to serve the care group. And that means our services, when you enter a community, you're getting better nutrition, You're getting more wellness and activities daily, which creates the socialization you need. And those are positive health incomes. And through that work and sort of the constant care that's provided, we're reducing ER visits, skilled nursing stays, as well as hospitalizations. And all that that's taken a big burden off not just the healthcare system, but also saving money for Medicaid and Medicare. Senior living services and products, we're going to see unprecedented demand for the reasons I just covered. And we're going to need a lot of help and a lot of coordination with the group on this webinar. We do have challenges out there. The growth is a good thing, and we're going to be challenged because there's going to be supply and we're going to need more demand. There's going to be demand and we'll need more supply. And then there's workforce challenges. Obviously, as the boomer generation enters an older age and enters into these communities, Gen X and some of the younger generations, we're going to need support, and technology is going to need to intervene and be part of that solution around how we care for seniors moving forward. So resident expectations, I want to put a quick slide in here. I think this is important, but it was sort of mentioned by Adeline. Residents are going to expect more. The group that's currently in is starting to demand more technology. They will use their devices. They will use their tablets. That demand's going to grow, and they're going to want it when they want it, how they want it, and they're going to want good, efficient support and connectivity with it. On the business end, which we're very focused on, we're going to focus a little bit more on today. There's going to be business needs. Generally speaking, as an industry, we need senior living to measure our data better. Aggregate data, we need it. It's being measured in silos, but we have to bring it together, and we, by our gentlemen, our membership in our industry, to really be able to track and understand cost management, health and wellness, and value-based care. We need to prove the outcomes we're delivering to residents is helping the entire healthcare spectrum. So there's been a pivot. I've been with Argentum about 8 years, and I've seen a significant pivot towards technology and what it, partnering with it, looking at it, and figuring out how we need to manage it moving forward. This is going to continue to happen, but the do more with less sort of conversations becoming much more prominent in the past really 18 to 24 months. Some of the functional needs that are out there, interoperability always been out there, but continues to be a challenge. Integration, care coordination, efficiency in our record keeping, business intelligence, it's much more important. It's growing in its importance. And then predictive interventions, and I'll explain that a little bit. The emerging technologies, telehealth, AI is in every conversation. It's in ours as well. Robotics is getting there. It's been around, but the applications are starting to become a little more clear. And then passive remote monitoring. This is a big conversation that's been happening lately, and some new technologies out there that are not video-based and thus less intrusive. Those are starting to make their way into senior living, and this is the part where it's allowing our industry to monitor the behavior of residents, and where there is some signs of change in behavior, we can intervene, whether that's sort of in the case of a potential fall a resident may have, or a UTI or something along those lines. Their behavior and being able to monitor that is going to help us significantly. Then there's technology considerations, CapEx. There's going to be more CapEx projects from what I can tell out in our industry. We have been through COVID and we've been through inflation, and we've kind of sat and waited in general on some of these projects. I think that's starting to happen. You're going to see people look for new systems or upgrade their current systems. There's got to be new buildings built. And where we can't build new buildings, I think there's going to be a lot of retrofits of existing spaces as well as reconstruction. So I think you're going to start to see a lot more activity as we move towards 2025 and beyond. Barriers, I want to share with you some of the things we hear. I don't think any of this is new to the group. Cost is always a barrier, training, staffing, leadership turnover, all these things that you're very aware of. But I want to highlight poor internet access or connectivity is always in this conversation. It may not be the first thing mentioned, but I think everyone understands the foundational support and importance of that connectivity, and it is part of every conversation that I'm aware of. I wanted to share real quick some data points we had come out of our technology survey. It's the first one we did as an organization. We're going to be doing a lot more, so know that that's part of our charge as an industry association. But this one was done Q4 of 2023, primarily owner and operators, corporate titles, and on average, each participant, their company probably managed or owned in their portfolio about 30 communities. So what did we hear from them? The most necessary elements of a technology or to achieve a comprehensive population health management system: partnership and collaboration. Obviously, technology and vendors are part of that. Investment in technology and infrastructure, and then the deployment and widespread use of EHRs. I don't think there's any surprises there. We mentioned cost being a challenge. We need capital. We're going to work with you guys on how do we get more capital into this. And we did ask, hey, if you did have a $2 million windfall, where would you put some of that capital? What would you look at? And as you can see here, some answers that, once again, I'm not sure are surprised, but still important to know and might reaffirm sort of what you've been hearing. But internet connection and redundancy at all sites, wall-to-wall Wi-Fi in all sites, upgrade technology platforms for future growth, finding solutions for outcome data and integrated health records, interoperability is in there, benchmarks are in there. You can see everything that's sort of top of mind with the operators. Tech future, we sort of wanted to put this slide in here. I just want this group to understand how our industry sees Argentum. A nonprofit association is important in this, and we see ourselves as important as well. We're going to work to be the platform. We're going to work to catalyze thinking. We really want to urge and encourage our operators and owners to adopt technology. It's important for the industry, and of course for us, beyond that is measuring data that the technology generates. So that's very critical to us as an organization. We have to aggregate that data and make the argument of the great care that our senior living operators are providing residents. Eager to co-innovate. This one was very exciting to me, and actually this was the one element I went, wow, thank you. 80% of the folks that took this survey said they are eager to innovate and co-innovate with technology providers. So hold them to it. We're going to sort of hold them to it. This is where it really needs to happen. Those opportunities to really build out proof of concept and some of the solutions that are working in the marketplace. And then I wanted to sort of keep in here, let's not forget, Argentum itself is a policy group. We are focused on how do we shape regulation moving forward, and we will be working on that. Generally speaking, we need to incentivize, and we need government and other entities to incentivize the adoption of new and critical technologies for senior living. We once again believe we are the future of taking care of seniors and ensuring they're staying out of skilled nursing, out of keeping them out of the ER and keeping them out of hospitals and providing great years in their senior years. So we're going to work hard to make sure that the adoption of technology is incentivized. So in concluding, we have a very promising future. The demographics are very much in the favor of senior living. We believe we have a great product that's going to be key to that long-term care spectrum, but we've got to work with the groups on this call around change and forging those new technology alliances. You're a significant part of this future, and we need your expertise. So with that, I will conclude and turn it right back over to you, Adeline.
Thank you, Brad. Great job, right on time. Thank you. So let me change the presenter here so we can start the panel. Show this window. There you go. Okay, so now it's time to start a panel. Special thanks to Dave Elder from Amicus Networks for supporting this webinar. I appreciate your help. Put some money into this. So I guess the first question I would like to ask the panel is one where, when I started this research, this venture looking at connectivity in senior living, I've heard a lot of comments about, well, the market is not ready yet. Seniors is not necessarily, the low-hanging fruit for managed service providers or technology vendors. What's your take on that, Dave? Are they wrong?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I lost you that was the strangest thing. I lost you for 1 second. Can you just, what was first question? Can you say it again?
Yeah, no, I was saying, when I started this journey researching senior living, there was some perception out there in the market that this market is not ready for managed service providers yet.
Okay.
Because seniors are not necessarily keen on technology and so on. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's interesting. I remember years ago having that conversation with somebody saying, you know, they're X number of years, I don't remember what it was, behind hospitality. We do a lot in the hospitality space. We have 5,500 with Safety Net Access, our parent company, 5,500 of those sites around the United States and Canada. So we're very familiar with providing this managed Wi-Fi support structure. And I remember having that conversation, and you know, what's changed over the past few years is phenomenal. And I think it's a misnomer to think that, because not only is technology adoption increasing with seniors, but also the technology that's required in senior living facilities to perform, kind of like Brad was talking about, and pull the data that we're going to need and provide the services that are needed. It's here, and you know, we're seeing it in the properties that we're deploying. We're seeing a dearth of technology. I mean, some of the properties we're going out to now, some of them don't have networks, or something that just cannot support what the residents are now demanding and what the property needs in order to provide those valuable services. And I'll make one quick little note. I think it was in a previous panel, Adelaine, where someone had mentioned that Wi-Fi calling in 2019, Wi-Fi calls surpassed calls over cellular network. So you know, you look at something as basic as that, and you realize that having a reliable network just becomes, you know, mission critical.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Eric, are you as excited about connectivity in senior living as Dave is?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the space right now, certainly for service providers like us, but I think it's beyond just how many access points do we want to put out there. I think it's about the opportunity to make a difference for folks in these communities. I agree certainly with what Brad said about connectivity as being sort of foundational, or I think you call it the baseline for every technology implementation and discussion that's out there. And I think that what's so exciting about what we're doing in the senior living space, and I don't mean us as Dual Path, I mean us collectively on this panel and beyond, is the difference that it can make for residents. They're, you know, in the hospitality environments or in conventional MDU, which are spaces that I think look speciously similar in terms of the Wi-Fi element, but are actually, they have far more differences than analogs with senior living. I think that in those spaces, it's about the connectivity and internet connection and, okay, stream your video and all of that stuff. And I think, yeah, that is important in the senior living space, but I think there's so many other things that can make a difference for folks. I mean, you think about, why is it that we have senior living communities? It's to cater towards the specialized needs of aging adults, health, wellness, safety, and the folks that are involved in a lot of cases, the decision to live in one community or another are beyond just the residents themselves. It's the adult children. And I think that, you know, the folks that are in these communities are not just end users, they're residents. There are mothers and fathers and grandparents, aunts and uncles, and the communities themselves have really highly specialized functions. And I think that the opportunity is for the technology to match those specialized functions in being able to perform almost what you would call like a sacred duty of preserving the wisdom and the relationships of our elders that live in these places. So sort of a long answer to a short question, but I think definitely right now is an excellent and an awesome time to be discussing the connectivity and the technology implementations in these types of environments, because they can make such a difference for the quality of life of the residents living in them.
And I know you're very passionate about this, Eric, when we spoke about it. Scott, can you have a lot of experience in the field, perhaps tell us a bit some differences between assisted living versus independent living and other subsegments and what you have seen out there in your deployments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big difference as far as independent living. We are seeing that, seniors that are moving in don't want to let go of the working world. They still want that engagement, and I think that ultimately comes across overall. You know what? The reason why folks go ahead and move into these senior living facilities is for that engagement, and that engagement prolongs the quality of their life. And for them to be able to still consider consulting on the side as far as being able to stay busy with some sort of work, or even as we're starting to see more of these communities moving toward internet based or internet centric type activities like pub trivia, for example, that allows everybody to get together, get engaged, have fun, but that underlying technology of the Wi-Fi system is required. Otherwise, nobody's going to have fun if you try to hit the answer 5 times and you've got the dreaded lag of not being able to answer. Meanwhile, you watch the point bar continue to go down, and by the time the 5th time hits, you've lost 250 points, and that means you lost to your neighbor. And guess what? You're going to hear about it for the next week. On the assisted living side of things, in that area, you know what? Back in the day, we were able to sit there and slap up some APs in a hallway and be able to at least provide, nurse coverage that was adequate for what they needed. Now at this point, everything is getting tied to having a connection. So therefore, when they get into the room and they get close to the patient, into the corner of the room, things of that nature, they need that connectivity to stay. And we all know that there's going to be tons of interference with all sorts of different equipment and such. So, from an assisted living side of things, not only that, but I also see where, streaming TV is going to start populating throughout all of these, independent and assisted living as well. The days of, just having the standard over-the-air channels is not going to be good enough. Somebody's going to get into an assisted living and they're expecting to get something similar to like what they had back home as far as, different streaming services and plenty of channels to go with. So that's also going to have to be something that's going to need to ride on the network as well.
Great, thank you. By the way, for the audience who may be not clear, Scott, Eric, and Dave represent managed service providers. That is the organizations that provide the connectivity to the senior living communities. Now we're going to hear from Lawrence, who is actually an IT director at a senior community property, to tell us about your operational experience, what you see out there on the field, both in terms of resident expectations and in terms of how difficult or challenging it is to meet those expectations.
Yeah, thank you. You guys can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, so Eric and Dave kind of brought something up, in that a network, the basic function of the network should just work, right? Computers, network, internet. And that kind of ties into us outsourcing the day-to-day operations to professional technology organizations like Dave and other MSPs. What I see and my brethren see as IT directors is that we don't necessarily want to be in the business of generic IT. Managing the generic part is not a revenue generator. So we want to focus on what improves the quality of life for our caregivers and improves the quality of life of our residents. I think Scott kind of hit the head of where we've seen things progress over the last few years, where data connectivity for internet is changing based on the creativity of residents who have a lot of time on their hand to stream what they want to stream, right? And the cost of bringing TV and cost of bringing the services into the building increase, right? As an operator, we have to protect our NOI, make sure that we provide the right services. So we see residents getting creative, and the demand on the network and the staff becomes pretty intense, right? So from that aspect, having an underlying MSP or underlying PTO able to take care of that network so that the team members can focus on the unique demands of every resident is key for us.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Brad, coming back to you, I would like to understand, what initiatives does Argentum have specifically for connectivity, if any?
So we are, I would say we're trying to be prescriptive in how things get done, because that's not who we are. I'm not an expert in technology nor connectivity. So as an organization, we usually lean on our membership, which includes both the owner operator side as well as the supplier side. So what we have done, we've had a number of innovative technology meetings. We pulled together some of that information. That's what drove that survey, to get a baseline survey done on some of the technology needs and future needs of the industry, and get the perspective of our owner operators. But we are in the process of forming sort of a technology and innovation council that's going to really inform us and tell us what to do. And that's, I don't have that perfect answer for you on this one, but that's who we are. That, we need our membership and the greater industry to sort of say, hey, here's what we need from you. And then we run out and we work our tail off to deliver it. So that's a lot of what we focus on. Of course, part of that's going to be education, webinars like this. So very glad to be on this webinar, but these are the things we're going to look to do. And once again, put technology and connectivity front and center of the industry, and make sure people understand how others are using it. So, if it's working here, we want to share it with our industry. And the beautiful thing about this industry, and I won't mention the two previous industries I was with, but this industry, when they figure something out, they share it. And that's the beauty of senior living. They want everyone to thrive. And it's why I'm here. And I think others who are involved in our industry would say the same thing. So for us, we're kind of that connector, that conduit through which we hope we can drive innovative thinking. And then really, once again, we need this group on the call to kind of tell us how that's done, or tell our operators, our members, our industry how to do it. So this is very enlightening, and in some of these conversations, I appreciate you including me, because it's very good to hear from the group on this call.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the panelists here would be eager to work with you to help your members figure out what to do next. By the way, reminder to the audience, feel free to submit your questions in the chat box so we can review them and answer them in due course. I would like to perhaps now dive into kind of the business aspects of this. There are a lot of property owners and property operators out there. This seems to be a very concentrated industry, with kind of the top 50 representing the bulk of the property owners. How are the technology decisions made, in your opinion, and especially in terms of connectivity? And how do they see this as in terms of business case? Does a property need to have a minimum number of units to be considered a good candidate, or anybody's view on this?
So,
sorry, go ahead.
So I would say, so I think we need to kind of divide this into two segments: one, construction, and two, an existing and kind of a replacement, because that's kind of where everything sits. So are you looking for a response from construction design, or are you looking for responses, hey, I'm an existing entity and I need to upgrade?
Yeah, I'd like to know both. I'm sure the majority of senior living communities are brownfield properties, which will still need to have some sort of upgrade at some point.
Yeah. Scott, I'll let you start.
Thank you. So I'll touch on the, it's easy to cover the new construction. It's mighty nice to be able to be at a crossroads and be able to put a new building in the ground that has all the right technology and all the right connectivity in it right from the go. The problem in the industry right now is a struggle around the existing properties and the lack of capital that they have to be able to take something that was built, 10, 20 years ago and try to get that modernized to what today's needs are. And if you start with the most basic foundation, it goes back to cabling. The cabling of old, when a building was put together, that the internet was just something that literally, I mean, even just 5 years ago, I'd walk a hallway with an executive director and somebody would say, "Oh, who's that nice man?" And the response would be, "Oh, he's here for the internet." And the resident response, "Oh, I don't use that." And that's going to be very different. But the problem is you're still stuck with the infrastructure of the needs of those residents then. And, we all know that it is difficult and there's a lot of headwinds when it comes to a senior living community because you have a lot of fixed costs around the medical side of things that is very difficult. And in this industry, those properties and communities require very high occupancy in order to be profitable. So then to turn around and say, well, guess what? You now need a capital investment to go ahead and run the proper cabling to make connectivity work the way that upcoming residents are going to demand. That's a very difficult hill to climb, and it's going to have to be phased over multiple years with some creative solutions to try to patch your way through, the next 5 years, for example. So I'm not envious of those that are part of the existing buildings that have been around for quite a while, because it is going to be a lot of I'll date myself and say back in the 80s, you got to pull a MacGyver and try to figure out how to make things work and patch things together to get you through until you can finally get the proper capital to get through the entire investment.
Thank you, Scott. Any other remarks?
I think that what maybe Adeline, we had talked about before, and what's in your report is about economy of scale, right? The size of a community and the kind of best kind of dollar amounts that are going forward towards putting in these infrastructures and the ongoing services. And I think that there are smaller communities that have a little bit more trouble with this from a CapEx and an OpEx side, simply because they only have 35, 40 beds or something like that, and they don't necessarily have the same economy of scale of a 200 or 300 unit community. Yet they still need the connectivity, they still need all of those features and functions. And so I think it's kind of a charge for us as service providers to get more creative with how it is that we're delivering service to all sorts of different sized communities, or even a kind of a campus style environment where you have a lot of different cottages or disconnected buildings. And I think that there's some new technologies available for us collectively to use in terms of decentralized delivery methods, things like taking the same kind of technologies that satellite offices have used in the commercial environments for many years, things like tunneling. So you have access points that are tunneling back to either a data center or another location to leverage the economy of scale of multiple communities together in order to get that bang for your buck in terms of the operational expense. But I think that we as service providers need to solve for any and all size communities, because I don't think there's really, there's not a differentiation of a need. There's only a differentiation of size between different communities that affects their buying power.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's this overwhelming sort of feeling that owners and operators get when thinking about this sort of overhaul. Like you were saying, there's this old cabling running through. What does the cable path look like? We had a property and they wanted to put in new cabling, and we're okay, here's what it's going to be, and you end up like drilling through concrete, things like this, right? It becomes, you don't know what you don't know until you get in there. But that, like you were saying, Eric, there are technologies out there that can bypass all of that, tearing up walls and things like that, things like Corning's Clear Track, right? And positron, people like this, right? So there are options. So it's like, it doesn't have to be tearing your building apart necessarily.
It's a really good point, Dave. And like one of the technologies that you just mentioned is something that allows one to use existing cabling to push a lot more bandwidth from before, using the same type of cabling that old DSL used, but being able to do it at Ethernet speeds. I think that there needs to be a lot of care and thought into the selection and application of those technologies, because what can happen is it ends up being sort of kick the can in some ways of like, hey, let's not run the new cabling now, let's not run the fiber or the Cat6, let's use this other thing. But then you try to say, okay, let's now do an IPTV solution that uses multicast over this infrastructure that's really not prepared to take on that burden, and then you can have some challenges. And then you're like, oh, okay, I used this kick the can thing to save $250,000 here, but now I've pushed $750,000 3 years from now, and this $250,000 I just spent, you know, it's not a really good ROI. So yeah, Dave, I agree with you completely that there are things that can help mitigate some of those costs, and I think that they need to be applied with care and very, very carefully looked at in terms of the long-term viability of those solutions and really the long-term road mapping of the community. And I think looking at long-term road mapping and looking at infrastructure as a 10-year or even 20-year sort of capital amortization versus you buy an access point or a computer and that's like a 5-year amortization, right? The way that we look at capital expense in terms of infrastructure, I think there's an opportunity to change and see that for really what it is, which is a much more long-term capital expense rather than a 3, 5, 6-year expense.
Yeah, and oftentimes, we have those conversations, Eric, and we arrive at that conclusion, right? But and I think that's the importance of working with someone who's been around it and understands it. And I think Brian, I can't remember if it was you, I think he was talking about, this idea of collaboration. It's I mean, I can't stress enough that collaboration, not only from an implementation and design standpoint, but the ongoing support is, like you said earlier, Eric, it's different. We do hospitality over here, we do multifamily, but man, I will tell you, it is a very different support model. You need to have different people around to support senior living. It's a different person.
Yeah,
it's definitely a delicate balance, right? If you have an aging building, the IT infrastructure and making sure that you have the right service for the residents is not the only thing vying for budget, right? So then it becomes a conversation with leadership to identify, okay, what has precedent, right? Is the HVAC unit on the rooftop, is that agent? Is the washer dryer, right? I'm going to assume Dave or Eric or Scott, you guys have been in situations where you were ready to deploy a technology and then something else in an aging building broke and took precedent over a budget for IT. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. So this is kind of probably an odd question coming back, but if you were to list like the top 5 budget categories and where IT sits in those top 5 when it comes to an operator, from your perspective, right? If you're to look at the other, like top 5, what would you list those top 5 and where would you list IT?
Unfortunately, I would probably put it somewhere around the 4 range.
Is that you personally, or that's what you think operators or owners see it as?
As operators and owners. Because obviously, you know what, people are number one. You know what, yeah. without the staff, without the medical team there, you know what, that has to be priority number 1. And obviously with the recent inflation hits, makes it very difficult to have any other money trickle down to 2 through 5 when 1 is taking up a vast majority, and rightfully so, of the overall budget.
Yeah.
I was just going to share labor, food, utilities are usually your big 3. So to your point, Scott, it could be 4. That could be where we come
in. We have some questions from the audience. It's probably a good time now to address them. By the way, someone missed your presentation, Brad, so they want to know which organization you represent. Maybe you can. By the way, there's a handout of Brad's presentation that's available for download on the dashboard. So you want to remind?
Yes, sure. Argent, we represent what we define as senior living. primarily for-profit, private pay companies and management groups that operate senior living communities. For us, that's independent living, assisted living, memory care, and CCRCs fall into that. And as I often do, just because it is part of a general understanding there, we do not represent skilled nursing. You know, once again, we see that as healthcare where we're more care-based and preventative care.
Yeah. A specific question for you, Eric, and then someone else feel free to step in. What are some of the common hurdles or challenges you encounter when meeting with senior living operators?
What are the common hurdles when, sorry, say the last part of the question one more time?
Or challenges you encounter when meeting with senior living operators?
When meeting with senior living operators.
I guess it's a broad questions about their expectations or understanding of technology.
Yeah, I think that some of the more challenging discussions that I've had with operators are folks that are not yet in the realm where they believe that, or they've had managed Wi-Fi in the past. So the paradigm that they're operating in is sort of the resident is in charge of getting their own internet service, and or maybe they have a bulk television service but nothing with internet. They don't have pervasive connectivity around their campus, and especially some operators that are going from the have not in terms of managed Wi-Fi to the have. There exists a large kind of budgetary expectation delta in that, because these networks are have become a relatively large line item on budgets. That is because over the years, the coverage requirements have changed, even going back to when we used to have single band networks, 2.4 gigahertz, lower amounts of bandwidth, to 5 gigahertz networks. While just looking at the physics of it, 5 gigahertz does not pass through walls and other obstacles as well. So now you need more access points. Each wireless access point has multiple radios in it. And now with Wi-Fi 6E, there's even a third band of 6 gigahertz. So that's a whole nother design consideration. It's been said on this panel many times that the requirements of the load that those networks take on has increased. So that means we need more robust equipment. And all of that, along with other kind of normal inflationary pressures, has driven the cost of those infrastructures up a bit. So I think that that's a challenge there. I think that the way to meet that challenge is to not just look at these networks as, hey, here's Wi-Fi and internet, right? Here's, you know, grandma or grandpa being able to do FaceTime video and audio chats, or Zoom, or get streaming video off of Hulu or Netflix, because I think that's really just like layer one of this multi-layered sort of cake of what is possible with these infrastructures. I think that there's many possibilities in terms of caregiving applications, medication dispensers that increase or improve medication adherence, managed smart devices, sensors, things that make it easier for the folks in these communities to live frictionless lives, things that feed back data to family members about health and wellness, things that are doing things like remote health telemetry monitoring, fall detection, and other automation that not only makes people's lives easier, but makes people safer and healthier in these communities. And I think that once sort of the whole picture is revealed of all of the different benefits, both operationally and from an amenity perspective, that's when things get really clear with operators, in my experience, around the whole investment ROI cost aspect of this. I think that the folks that are looking at it like, hey, we just need connectivity, we just need Wi-Fi, I think they're only hitting that first layer of what's possible with these infrastructures and these systems. And I think that there's a lot more to what can be done in order to, I don't want to use the word monetize, because it's not about like this is an asset and we're going to resell or mark it up. It's really about value. What is the value that we can derive from these infrastructures with the ability to make residents' lives better? We talked about staffing. It's come up several times on this call already. How can we create more efficiencies with our workflow operations and have more connected devices or more integrations. And again, I'll go back to what Brad said earlier. The foundation for all of that stuff to work together is this connectivity, and for the connectivity to be robust, secure, and reliable.
Okay, Eric. A number of questions, some of them around, sorry, Brad, wanted to ask something?
Real quick, I think it's important, this group. No, I think one, and again, others on the call can affirm this, but on a high level, internal expertise at these companies. Lawrence is in a great position. His company realized the importance of technology, and they have a dedicated position towards it. When you talk about some of the smaller to medium-sized operators, they might not have that in-house expertise. So just remember, you've got to kind of go in there and educate them on what is happening, what is needed, and where things are heading. So I think that's an important part of it. And I think the industry's changing. I think there'll be more Lawrences out there, I hope. But I think that's kind of the current environment as well.
And I think that's a good segue to the other question about, is this an OpEx model? Is it a CapEx model? You know, there's a rise in network as a service, right? And that includes not only equipment, but also the knowledge, the know-how that you described, Brad, being outsourced to, you know, the folks that understand this business too. Perhaps Dave, you know, what's your views on OpEx versus CapEx model and network as a service?
I think with any of the seven, Eric, that was really well said. I think that might be, I just want to go back a little bit, talking about the network in those terms. I think it's very easy to get caught up in resident connectivity, right? Having connectivity to Wi-Fi, TV, all these sorts of things. But we are talking about connectivity for lifestyle and taking care of these folks. I think you said that great, and I think that's where the conversation needs to change, and where the education needs to happen, right? We were talking about healthcare here, and that connectivity is critical, not just connecting my tablet from my room or that type of thing. Yeah. From a business standpoint, I mean, that really comes down to the, you know, the structure of the organization that we're selling to. A lot of what we do is on the CapEx side, and then we just, you know, have ongoing support for them. But, you know, like you said, for some of these smaller ones, that's not feasible, right? So we, you know, I mean, we'll offer, just like you said, right, network as a service, and just try and find an affordable solution that we can do and charge monthly without having a big upfront cost. You know, we kind of do it both ways. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Lane, but maybe someone else can weigh in as well.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of tap on that, Dave. So assuming that NOI is always perfect in a senior living community, and we always have the budget we want, right? There's the challenge that we have in CapEx is that we may get budget this year, and after 5 years, we may have an asset become end of life, end of support, end of sale, and then we have no budget. So then we put our MSP or IT department at a disadvantage of being able to support our residents as they need, or our staff as they need. So for us, we're blending toward more of as a service across the platforms, right? Whether exclude nurse call, exclude wander, you know, when we're talking network infrastructure, PCs, Wi-Fi, the switching to support residents and our community leaders in the buildings. The advantage for us, if NOI supports it, is if we have an MSP or a professional technology organization that does Wi-Fi as a service or network as a service, and they encapsulate every 3, 4, or 5 years a natural upgrade to the current technology, then those 5 years are a budget for that upgrade and not having to pay for a massive CapEx outlay later and doing a capital call to investors or what have you. So from my seat, I see that more operators will shy away from capital, even though that's our normal gut reaction to going to more as a service, because that's where the industry is going. But it also protects our team members and our staff and our residents from being too laggard in the technology that's being deployed for the consumption requirements that residents will be demanding.
Thank you.
Adelaine, if I can just chime in on that piece as well. I think again we are approaching a fork in the road here. We have done quite a few models as far as like a true Wi-Fi as a service, and a lot of the drivers around Wi-Fi as a service, I'm just not seeing in the senior living space yet. If I take a look at hospitality, they're the ones that kind of trailblazing this, and they, through their ownership groups, are really starting to push now and getting brands to approve 8 to 10 year networks. So, you know, in taking a look at the, you know, the CapEx model, in my view right now, if somebody was to ask me which is the best way to go, the CapEx model is probably the best way to go, because you'll be able to get a longer term out of that network and lower overall total cost of ownership versus jumping on either an OpEx or a Wi-Fi as a service as of today. Now, in a few years, that may end up changing, but at least right now, I think we're safe to be able to say that, you know what, we can get that capital investment to last 8 or upwards to 10 years.
Thank you,
I
Scott.
think traditionally that's right, but when we start looking at some of the more current technologies, they're end of lifing and end of supporting in less than 10-year cycles. So that makes it difficult for an operator to sustain with proper support without an emergency outcast. And trust me, that's something that a decade ago we could push technology 8 years, 9 years. Today, that's a lot harder when you have Meraki and Ruckus and Cambium all, you know, having that subscription model, and the technology's end of lifing before that 10-year cycle. And from what we see from a reality standpoint of longevity of the equipment and the quality of that equipment is degrading, especially over the last 4 years, where we're seeing the technologies not last that long. So we're having to budget earlier and forecast earlier for that change. I would love for a 10-year budget. We just don't. We don't see that as something that's going to be sustained.
Okay. So we're almost at the top of the hour. We have maybe a question, time for last question, which is, you know, we talk about technology. Can we escape the AI thing? Is it too early to talk about AI in this space? What are your thoughts? Maybe starting with you, Dave.
You know,
I
I don't think it's, what's that?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to be the expert on AI, right? We see some of the benefits, and I think in patient care and having, you know, I think a lot of what we're talking about here, and I think Eric, you mentioned it earlier, is around data, or it was Brian maybe, but it's data, and what are we able to do with that data to enhance resident care and staff efficiency. AI in particular, I'm no expert. It's going to help us, in, you know, to that end. But we have to have the infrastructure in place, right, in order to be able to support that and to have, like, you know, it's kind of like the plumbing. Like, everything that we're talking about relies on having a reliable, well-supported network across the board. Not really an AI answer. Maybe someone else can jump in on that.
Dave, I agree with you completely. I think that the plumbing and the infrastructure, the plumbing, as you called it, it's got to be there. I think that out of any industry that participates in managed Wi-Fi as a service, senior living is the one that is going to benefit the most from the implementation of artificial intelligence or machine learning. And that is because there is so much information that is gatherable in the resident environments. We're seeing all of these sensors, all of this information, electronic health records, et cetera. And healthcare specifically has been already taking major advantage of AI designs, things like medication design, predictive analytics. And when you have the infrastructure, you have the plumbing, and you have things like data warehousing, where you're able to put data in a place that is accessible to a common database, something like Power BI or Tableau, that's when really some of the magic happens. is a convergence of the different technologies available. There's the data gathering, there's IoT, there's the sensors, there's the data warehousing, and now there is the application of AI-based models that can look at this vast amount of data and make inferences based on that information about what can we do more efficiently, how can we care for residents better, how can we create better outcomes. So I personally think the future is very bright in AI. That's why we at DualPath have made a lot of investments in doing machine learning and artificial intelligence analysis of things like energy management data points, care quality data points, and staff analytic, journey analytic data points. So I think it's super important in this business, probably more important than almost any other business that manage Wi-Fi touches.
Thank you, Eric. And maybe last word for you, Brad. I know you mentioned AI in your presentation.
I was going to agree with Eric, and one practical use that we see it with AI right now is in hiring. If operators can start to use predictive analytics to gauge the success of a new hire and how long they'll be with the organization, that's super critical. Staffing is a challenge here. And the last thing I'll leave is this right here. For both audiences and operator, when they look at their residents, they're going to want the residents using this to order dinner, order breakfast, sign up for game night, Scott, you know, everything like that. And they're going to want their operators or their caregivers to use this as well, because they don't want their caregivers on a computer. They want them out in the community giving care. And the more we can think about this and how it's used, I think that might be a little bit long term. It is happening now, but I think it's critical in this discussion.
Thank you. Well, I'm afraid this is all the time we got. I want to respect everybody's time, already past an hour. Fantastic panel. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, for sharing your insights as industry leaders. Thanks to the audience for all the questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't address all of those. Feel free to follow up with me or with any of the panelists. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.
Scott, Brad, Eric, Dave,
Thank you guys.
Adeline, thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.